Welcome to Homestead Reptile. We're going to be looking over the brief history of Dalmatians. So this morph is a wild type morph. Now the original animals that came out of the wild had spots. So there are 3 types of colored spots. You have blacks, reds, and greens. So you can see he has blacks, he has yellows, he doesn't have greens, but he has reds. So some of the spots on the side, you can see they're black with a little red dot in it. So that is a bullseye. So the cool thing about bullseyes, so it's not new, but it's new information. So it appears that bullseye, the trait, is genetic and that you only need one parent to have a bullseye to pass on more bullseyes, which are pretty awesome. That'd be something really fun to play around with. So he has some ink spots, he has some yellow spots, he has the normal black spots, and he has the red spots. So ink spots are just large spots about the size of a pea. Oil spots are spots that fade in or out depending on if your animal's fired up or fired down. And he has a few on his tail. You can see that little faded spot right there. It kind of looks oily, yellowish colored. So that spot fires up more when he's fired up, and he's mostly fired down right now. So that's an example of that. And you can see on his tail, he also has some big ink spots right there. Unfortunately, a lot of his best spots are on his tail, which is a horrible spot to have it, but that's how he has it. So he has a lot of different spot traits going on, but he's not a super spotty animal. But he comes from really high spotty lines. So his parents come from Crestopia. His father's line comes from a confetti line from the original confetti breeder, and altitude exotic. And he fires up a odd red color, and he kind of fires down a pinkish tone. But here's his parents coming up. You can see the father's gorgeous, his sibling is gorgeous, and I picked him because he can produce some amazing animals later down the road. This is one I produced, so this is what I will call an extreme spotty animal, 11 grams, and you can see he has hundreds of tiny spots. So he has 2 spot traits. He has the normal black spots, red spots, and I guess we'll say a third with that he does have a few bullseyes. There are some small black spots with a little red center, so he has a few bullseyes. Not as good as the first example. But this is just a heavy spotted animal. He'll get more spots as he ages. And the fun thing about Dalmatians are, like the breed they're named after, they're born with very little spots. And as they age, they'll get spottier and spottier. And that sometimes they can get spotty until they're about 30 grams. And this guy is just 11 grams, so he gets a lot more spots to grow. But again, you can see those red spots. This is my second baby. This is my holdback, and he has a bunch of spot traits. So he has some oils on his face. They're a little faded. You can see he has some red spots, some normal black spots. He has bullseyes. And he has a few smaller ink spots. Now, most of them are on his tail, which that's how it goes. The best spots are always going to be on the tail with these guys for whatever reason. And then they fling them off and they don't have them anymore, but that's just life. But he has multiple spot traits. He is a heavily spotted animal. Comes from our charcoal groups, and he fires up very dark, and he's probably going to get darker and darker as he ages, but really nicely spotted, good looking animal, and he has relatively decent structure, especially for a Dalmatian. So some of the problems that you'll see with Dalmatians are head structure, and there's a little bit of a reason why that has happened in the hobby. But again, your main spot traits that are in the hobby that have been described are oils, inks, bullseyes, and cluster spots. And that's going to be a fun one. So we have here, you can see those oils, you can see the inks, and you can see the reds. So he has a good amount of variety in spotting. And a lot of those spot traits are inheritable. So ink spots are inheritable, oil spots are inheritable, and cluster spots are inheritable, and cluster spots are a very interesting one to work with because you can get a lot of funky looking spots. I have a little red female that has a cluster spot that looks like a little star on her butt. So it kind of reminds me of a My Little Pony in a way, where they had those little things on their butts, like the little pictures or cartoons or whatever. But you can see here he's a very nice animal, lots of spots, and he has a lot of room to grow, and he has a relatively decent head. So this is just one of my holdbacks. You can see all those spots. Good looking animal. But he has at least 3 spot traits. Again, just an example of head structure, and he'll be right next to his little brother. So his little brother, him. Much better head structure. You can see him. This is when he was much younger. Not a whole lot of spots. This was when he was younger, barely any spots. And then I have a hatchling photo. So this is a great example of watching them grow into those spots, because they start out with barely any. And this is his father, and he's a small spotted animal as well. So this is my red-based animal. So he comes from a confetti line. He has some lovely oil spots. He mostly has oil spots. And he has a lot of red spots. So he's mostly in oil and red, but he also has some black spots. Now, he's not a super spotty individual, because most of the time you don't see his spots because they're oils. A lot of red spots on his head. And normally, for whatever reason, red-based animals are more likely to have more red spots. Don't know why. There's probably a reason for that. Probably something to do with the base color. Or red spots and red base might just go together. But you can see right here a lot of spots. You can see him a little bit better when he's fired down, which he rarely ever fires down. But here's a fired down images. Lots of spots on the head. You can see those oil spots on his dorsal. Some more spots on the side. But you can see he has a decent number of red spots. And he comes from a confetti line. He's also a hypo-red male. One reason I'm holding him and using him in my breeding programs, because that color is insane. Now here's my example of a cluster spot, and I love this girl. She has a lot of cluster spotting around her eye and her nose, and it's so fun because this trait is inheritable. So there have been babies that have had cluster spots that look like a J or a 5, and they pass it on. Not exactly that shape, but they'll pass on funky looking spots. So she has one funky cluster spot right there next to her leg that looks like a star. And that's just so cool. And she has some really massive red ink spots. See her fired up. But they're red, they're not black, and they're big red ink spots. So that's just really awesome and fun to play around with. So let's talk about health problems and controversies with this morph. So there are no known health problems with Dalmatians. The only thing most people don't like are the head structure, which is a cosmetic thing. And one thing to look out for in your super lines are close relatives. The most popular spotty animals come from closely related animals that everyone accidentally gets. Well, not accidentally gets. I get them on purpose, but the best looking animals to the best looking animals. So a great example of that is Daniel from Pangea, that amazing looking gecko. A lot of the super Dalmatians come from his lines. And that's just something to be aware of when breeding. Try to look out for animals that have those lines in it, so you're not pairing them together. It just makes the hobby more healthy and keep things more spread out. But they're pretty healthy otherwise.